Welcome, Dahlia.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I'm very happy to be with you.
Well, Dahlia, you've had a wild story from what we all understand. I've been following you on social media since the war broke out. What happened in Egypt to you after October 7th?
Oh, a lot has been happening in Egypt after October 7 and all over the Middle East, actually. I believe what Hamas did, the massacres that Hamas committed on October 7 has created a momentum for all the Islamist movements that has been working under the ground for at least the past decade or so to come back again and lead the public opinion. And unfortunately, they found it a ripe opportunity to do that as soon as Hamas committed this crime. They found it as an excuse to come up and bring back again to the surface the Palestinian cause, which has always been used by the Islamists to recruit people, to gain sympathy, and also to gain some kind of legitimacy to their violent activities, not only against Israel, but against the rest of the region. But the biggest surprise is that most of the states in the region, like most of the leaderships, have been bending to this extremist rhetoric in the street and somehow indirectly encouraging this Islamist movement to rise again, which will eventually hurt them as much as it is hurting Israel right now.
And you personally have been targeted by some of these extremists in Egypt. What happened there?
Yeah, actually, I at the beginning of the massacre, I didn't actually watch. I was watching it from the Egyptian and the Arab media. I did not watch it from the Western media or actually any source that can provide me the truth. So I thought it's just another clash between soldiers from Israel and militants from Hamas. That happens every now and then. Because this is how it was introduced in our media, by the way. But soon after, I was invited to a video conference by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel and the Ministry of Defense, where hundreds of Arab journalists and researchers were also attending. And they showed us the real videos of what happened on that day. Footage collected from the houses, from the streets, from even the mobile phones of the militants of Hamas, showing how brutal Hamas were, raping women, attacking children and the elderly, and blood everywhere. It was horrific in every way. So I just came to my social media accounts and I told the truth. I have a good following there, and actually it somehow attracted attention. Then I was invited to an interview with a think tank in Israel. It's the Institute of National Security Studies with Tel Aviv University. The interview went viral, and this raised a horrible backlash against me from both sides. One side is the extremist side, the radicals. Some of them went to my mother's house, looking for me. They want to, kill me or something. And the other side was I would call them the deep state or the establishment in Egypt, who were very angry that I said I'm supportive to Israel. Unfortunately, up till today, despite all the good relationship on the surface, again, between Egypt and Israel, in the deep state, there is a lot of controversy and a lot of tension about Israel being a friend or an enemy, or a historic enemy, but now a pragmatic friend for right now, So I think that's why I have been facing a backlash from both sides after this.
I'm sorry to hear what you've gone through. It does sound like it's been a challenge, and I hope you're staying safe. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Sisi regime. You talked a bit about that deep state, if you will, and we know that there are those within the Egyptian bureaucracy that still harbor a lot of distrust toward Israel, and there's also obviously a lot of conflicted feelings about the Palestinians themselves. Let's just talk about the refugee issue for a minute. The Sisi regime has refused to allow Palestinians to seek refuge on the other side of the border. In other words, there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the war about allowing the Palestinians of Gaza to escape the fighting temporarily and to find shelter in the Sinai Peninsula and then to be returned back. But the Sisi regime has rejected this. What's the thinking behind the Egyptian regime here? Why will they not provide that kind of help to the Palestinians?
Actually, it's shocking, and it's the first time this happens in our history, even in previous regimes. Despite their fear of Hamas leakage or the jihadist movements, militants leakage to Sinai, they have always provided a safe place for the Palestinians in Sinai, and they have always opened the borders because it's a big humanitarian issue. But this time, I think part of it has to do with the confusions that's happening on the policy-making level in Egypt since the beginning of the war. Because at the very beginning, there was some kind of silence from the leadership, from the regime, and also from other authorities in the country that are leading, including the military, the intelligence, and so everyone was silent. They did not want to intervene. Somehow, I would say they were turning their heads away until Israel finishes Hamas. But when things started to get very intense in media, promoting that Israel is just killing the Palestinians randomly or targeting civilians rather than targeting Hamas, and so this created a state of outrage among the public, fueled by Islamist pressure, Islamist rhetoric, and somehow the regime feared that this outrage may be directed at them. Especially, we are now at a time when Egypt is suffering a political crisis, an economic crisis, and the popularity of the president is not as strong as it was 10 years ago or 7 years ago even. So if this outrage plus the anger coming from the economic bad situation is combined together and directed at the regime, this is a source of fear. That's why we saw the rhetoric has changed afterwards, and al-Sisi started to speak about supporting the resistance movement after calling it Hamas, after calling it the terrorist organization, and then showing sometimes exaggerated support to the Palestinian cause in the past few weeks. This somehow served the regime, but also one of the things that they highlighted and emphasized very much in Egypt, also in service to this concept of keeping the regime in power, of keeping the military important to the Egyptian people and so on, is the idea of that the Palestinians' entry to Sinai is a threat to Egypt's national security. By saying that if they entered, Hamas will enter with them, and then will use the ground of Sinai or the land of Sinai as a base to attack Israel. And this will again incite retaliation from Israel and cause a war between Egypt and Israel eventually. It's an exaggerated story, but it has some truth in it. Because yesterday, one of Hamas leaders came on Al Jazeera and he said, in case we entered Sinai, the desert of Sinai will not swallow us, but we will use it as a base, to even a more solid base, to continue our attacks on Israel. So yes, this story is tough and very big, but it has some truth to it, unfortunately.
Okay, I want to ask you one more question before we wrap up here, Dahlia. The question of tunnels that apparently are still stretching from the Gaza Strip into Sinai, under the Rafah crossing, around the Rafah crossing, what's known as the Philadelphia corridor. How is it? I mean, I remember when right after the so-called Arab Spring, when Sisi came to power, he shut down a huge number of these tunnels. He destroyed them. Somehow they're operating again. And somehow Hamas is using them. People are coming in and out of Sinai into Gaza. We believe that these tunnels are also being used to rearm and resupply Hamas. What is the story here? How is it that the Egyptian government has not cracked down on these tunnels consistently?
Right. Actually, to understand why the fight against the tunnels has stopped in Egypt, we have first to understand that it's in the mindset of the Egyptian state and people, as well as the mindset of most of Arabs, by the way, is that these terrorist organizations, Hamas, Jihad, Islamic Jihad, and so on, are terrorist organizations only if they attack Egypt or Arab countries, or if they form a threat to Egypt and Arab countries. But if they attack Israel, they are heroes, and they are like the resistance movement, and so, and we should not intervene in what they're doing. And sometimes in the past, they used even to encourage them. But so what happened is that when Hamas was a threat to Egypt, when the Islamic Jihad was a threat to Egypt, Egypt took severe actions to close the tunnels, flood them with water. It was a fight that took months against these tunnels, and they were able to close them eventually in 2015. And by the way, the Israeli military helped a lot in this, at least with joining the Egyptian military in launching airstrikes, like specific airstrikes on these tunnels, and also helping them get rid of some of the houses that were built on the border between Egypt and Gaza, with the purpose to encourage Hamas, also like give Hamas some kind of a legitimate entry into Sinai afterwards. This has stopped since then, and Hamas started to build. This is something maybe not many people in the West know, that not all of the tunnels are built in open areas. Actually, some of them are built inside houses of just ordinary civilians in Sinai. So the Egyptian military cannot just go and destroy a house and because there is a tunnel underneath. So as difficult as it has become, and Hamas also has changed its strategies of how to build these tunnels and use them through the houses, again hiding among the civilians of Sinai, has led to the difficulties that we are seeing today, that Egypt is no more able to control these tunnels. But this does not refute the fact that Egypt already knows about these tunnels and knows that there has been weapons smuggled through it, and other not only weapons, sometimes cars, sometimes food, etc. And the thing is that I believe the warnings that Hamas gave to Israel at the beginning or before the war, that be careful, something big is happening, is because Egypt have been monitoring somehow this smuggling of weapons, and so this may lead to something big.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. Daliah, I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll have you back sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm happy to be with you.